The sound of my plow blade scraping against frozen asphalt at 5 in the morning was music to my ears. But apparently, it was death metal to Patricia Henderson's delicate sensibilities. I had been running Henderson's snow removal services in Lakewood, Colorado for 8 years, and during that time, I had plowed through more storms, complaints, and bureaucratic nonsense than most people experience in a lifetime. My name is Lucas Kerrigan, and I took pride in making sure the residents of Pine Ridge Estates could get to work safely when winter dumped its white fury on our streets. The subdivision sat at the base of the Rocky Mountains, about 20 miles west of Denver, where storms could drop 2 feet of snow overnight without breaking a sweat. That particular December morning started like any other winter day in Colorado. I had woken up at 4:30, checked the weather radar on my phone, chugged 2 cups of coffee strong enough to strip paint, and headed out to my F-350 with the 8-foot plow blade attached. The storm had started around midnight and dumped about 14 inches of heavy, wet snow across the entire area. By the time I fired up the engine, the flakes were still coming down steady, and I knew I had my work cut out for me. Pine Ridge Estates was one of my main contracts. The subdivision contained about 200 homes, all cookie-cutter McMansions built in the early 2000s, when developers thought everyone wanted to live in a gated community with strict rules and an even stricter homeowners association. I had a standing agreement to plow the main roads and cul-de-sacs whenever snowfall exceeded 6 inches. The HOA paid me a flat monthly fee during winter months, plus extra for particularly heavy storms. It was good money, and most residents appreciated having clear streets by the time they needed to leave for work. Most residents, but not Patricia Henderson. I had just finished my second pass down Aspen Grove Lane when I noticed her standing on her porch in a pink bathrobe, arms crossed, face twisted into an expression that could curdle milk at 50 paces. Patricia was the vice president of the Pine Ridge Estates, HOA, a position she wielded like a medieval warlord, brandishing a spiked mace. She was 52 years old, had perfectly coiffed blonde hair that never seemed to move even in strong winds, and possessed the uncanny ability to find violations in anything that brought joy or convenience to others. I tried to pretend I did not see her, focusing instead on clearing the intersection near her house. The plow made its characteristic grinding sound as it pushed another wave of snow to the side of the road. Behind me, I could see the sun starting to lighten the eastern sky, turning it from black to deep purple. Patricia started walking down her driveway toward my truck. She was waving her arms like she was trying to signal a rescue helicopter. I sighed, put the truck in park, and rolled down my window. Cold air rushed in along with a few rogue snowflakes. "You have any idea what time it is?" she yelled before she even reached my truck. "About 5:20, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Storm dropped over a foot overnight, just doing my job." "Your job does not include waking up the entire neighborhood with that monstrosity at an ungodly hour." She pointed at my plow like it was a weapon of mass destruction. "The noise ordinance clearly states that no loud activities can occur before 7 a.m. on weekdays." I had dealt with this conversation before, though never quite this early in the season. "Patricia, the HOA contract specifically exempts emergency snow removal from noise ordinances. People need to get to work, and these streets need to be clear. You approved this contract yourself." I approved no such thing. And even if I did, there must be reasonable accommodations for residents who value their sleep and peace of mind. This is completely unacceptable. A few lights had come on in nearby houses. I could see curtains moving as neighbors peeked out to see what the commotion was about. Great. Patricia was not only complaining about noise, but also creating a bigger disturbance in the process. Look, I understand it is early, but if I wait until 7, people will be trapped in their driveways during rush hour. That is why the contract exists. The HOA board voted on this unanimously. Patricia's face reddened, visible even in the dim light from the street lamps. Well, I am calling an emergency meeting to revisit this ridiculous arrangement. You mark my words, Mr. Kerrigan. This is harassment, and I will not stand for it. She turned on her heel, nearly slipped on a patch of ice in her driveway, caught herself, and stomped back toward her house with as much dignity as someone in fuzzy slippers could muster. I sat there for a moment, watching her retreat, and wondered not for the first time why people like Patricia sought positions of minor authority. The cynic in me knew the answer, because it gave them the illusion of control in a world that largely ignored them otherwise. I finished plowing Pine Ridge estates by 6:30 that morning. By then, most residents were starting their day, and I received several waves of thanks from people warming up their cars or shoveling their walkways. A few even brought me coffee in travel mugs, which I accepted gratefully. This was why I loved my job, despite people like Patricia. Most folks appreciated reliable service and understood that some inconveniences were necessary for the greater good. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the Pine Ridge Estates HOA. It was formal, printed on expensive letterhead, and signed by Patricia Henderson in her capacity as acting HOA president. Apparently, the actual president, a reasonable guy named Tom Morrison, was visiting his daughter in Florida for the holidays. The letter informed me that my services were being placed under review due to numerous complaints regarding excessive noise, inconsistent service quality, and failure to adhere to community standards. It demanded that I attend an emergency HOA meeting the following Tuesday at 7 p.m. to address these concerns. Failure to attend would result in immediate termination of contract and possible legal action. I read the letter 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each pass. Numerous complaints. I had received exactly 1 complaint from Patricia herself. Inconsistent service quality. I had not missed a single contracted snow event in 8 years. Failure to adhere to community standards. I plowed snow. I did not paint houses or plant gardens. I called Tom Morrison directly. He answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear beach sounds in the background. Lucas, how are things back in the frozen tundra? Could be better, Tom. I just got a letter from Patricia about an emergency meeting. What is going on? There was a pause, and the beach sounds faded as Tom presumably walked away from wherever he was. What letter? What meeting? I read it to him word for word. Another pause, this one longer. That woman is going to give me an aneurysm, Tom finally said. Lucas, I am sorry. Patricia has been on a power trip ever since I left. Apparently, she sees this as her chance to remake the HOA in her image. I got calls from 3 other board members complaining about her behavior. She cannot actually terminate your contract without a full board vote, which requires a quorum of at least 4 members, and there are only 5 total. She is 2 votes short at minimum. So, what do I do about this meeting? Go to it, stay calm, and do not let her bait you into saying something she can twist around. I will be back on the 20th, which gives her about 10 days of acting authority. Just keep doing your job exactly as contracted, document everything, and remember that most of the board and residents support you. Thanks, Tom. Enjoy the beach. I will try, though this might put a damper on it. Patricia means well, but she has the diplomatic skills of a porcupine in a balloon factory. I hung up feeling slightly better but still annoyed. The meeting was 5 days away, and we were supposed to get another storm in the meantime. I decided to handle it the way I handled everything else: professionally, thoroughly, and by the book. The second storm hit on Saturday night, dumping another 10 inches of powder across the region. I started plowing Pine Ridge Estates at 4:45 a.m. Sunday morning, even earlier than the previous time. The streets were empty. The snow was falling in huge flakes that looked like pieces of torn paper, and my truck's headlights carved tunnels through the darkness. I was halfway through Birch Street when I saw Patricia's garage door opening. Even from a block away, I could tell it was her by the aggressive way the door jerked upward. She pulled out in her white Lexus SUV, which had probably never seen a dirt road in its pampered life, and drove straight toward my truck. For a moment, I thought she might actually ram me. Instead, she pulled alongside, rolled down her window, and started yelling over the sound of both our engines. "This is criminal harassment. I am documenting this for legal purposes." She held up her phone, recording me through the swirling snow. I simply nodded, gave a small wave, and continued plowing. There was no point engaging. She followed me for about 15 minutes, recording and occasionally yelling things I could not quite hear, before apparently deciding this was not worth her time and driving off. I thought about Tom's advice to document everything, so I made a mental note to write down the incident when I got home. I also made sure to save my GPS logs, which tracked every street I plowed and what time I did it. My truck system was pretty sophisticated, installed specifically because of situations like this. The HOA meeting took place in the community center, a building that mostly served as a venue for birthday parties and yoga classes. I arrived 15 minutes early and found about 30 residents already there, far more than usually attended these meetings. Word had apparently spread. Patricia sat at a folding table at the front of the room, flanked by 2 other board members, Gerald Finch, the treasurer, and Brenda Kowalski, the secretary. Both looked uncomfortable, like they would rather be anywhere else. Patricia, in contrast, looked like she was about to host the Oscars. She had dressed in a navy blue pantsuit and had printed materials stacked neatly in front of her. "Mr. Kerrigan," she said as I took a seat in the 3rd row, "how punctual. I appreciate you taking this matter seriously." "Always do," I replied evenly. The meeting started with standard HOA business: approval of previous minutes, financial reports, discussion of landscaping contracts for the spring. Patricia rushed through these items with barely concealed impatience, clearly eager to get to the main event. "Now, we come to a matter of critical importance to our community's well-being," she announced, standing up for dramatic effect. "The issue of snow removal services and whether our current provider meets the standards we expect and deserve." She launched into a presentation that must have taken hours to prepare. She had charts showing the times I had started plowing over the past 3 winters, noise-level comparisons between different types of plows, and even grainy nighttime photos of my truck on various streets. She claimed that I was systematically destroying the peace and tranquility of the neighborhood, that my equipment was unnecessarily loud and outdated, and that my refusal to wait until after 7 a.m. constituted willful disregard for community welfare. It was an impressive display of cherry-picked data and twisted logic. I had to give her credit for effort, if nothing else. When she finished, she looked around the room with an expression of triumph. "I move that we immediately terminate Mr. Kerrigan's contract and seek bids from companies that will show more respect for our community standards." "I second that motion," said a voice from the back. I turned and saw Deborah Vance, one of Patricia's longtime friends and fellow member of the Neighborhood Watch Committee. Of course she would be here. Gerald shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Patricia, do not we need to hear from Lucas? And should not we have the full board present for such a major decision? Tom Morrison delegated his authority to me as vice president during his absence, Patricia said sharply. We have a quorum with 3 members present. That is sufficient for any board action. Actually, it is not, I said, standing up. All eyes turned to me. According to the HOA bylaws, which I took the liberty of reviewing, contract terminations require a vote of at least 4 board members or a majority vote of homeowners at a properly noticed special meeting. This meeting was called with less than 7 days' notice, which does not meet the requirements for a special meeting under Colorado HOA law. I had done my homework. After getting Patricia's letter, I had spent an evening with the HOA bylaws and had even consulted with a lawyer friend who specialized in HOA disputes. Patricia's expression could have frozen the sun. "Mr. Kerrigan, you are out of order." "No, Patricia, you are," said a voice from the crowd. A man in his 60s stood up. I recognized him as Robert Chen, a retired attorney who lived on Maple Drive. "Lucas is absolutely right. You cannot terminate his contract without proper board vote or homeowner approval. Furthermore, the contract clearly states that snow removal is exempt from noise ordinances specifically because of the time-sensitive nature of the service." "I agree," said another voice. Then another. Suddenly, half the room was talking at once, with most people expressing support for keeping the current arrangement. Several residents stood up to praise my service and point out that they had never complained about the early morning noise. Patricia's face went from red to purple. "This is chaos." "Everyone sit down. I am running this meeting. Actually, until Tom gets back, we should probably table any major decisions," Gerald said quietly but firmly. "I appreciate your concerns, Patricia, but I think we are getting ahead of ourselves. Lucas has done good work for us, and one complaint is not enough to upend everything." "One complaint?" Patricia's voice rose to a near shriek. "I have documented dozens of violations." "From the same person," Brenda added, looking at her notes. "You have submitted multiple complaints, Patricia, but there have been no other formal complaints from any other residents." The meeting deteriorated from there. Patricia tried to maintain control, but the room had turned against her. After another 20 minutes of heated discussion, Gerald called for a motion to table the issue until the full board could meet in January, after Tom returned. The motion passed unanimously, with Patricia abstaining and glaring daggers at everyone. I left the meeting feeling vindicated but uneasy. Patricia was not the type to accept defeat gracefully, and I had a feeling this was far from over. I was right. The 3rd storm of December hit on Thursday, just 2 days after the meeting. It was a big one, with weather forecasters predicting up to 18 inches and wind gusts strong enough to create whiteout conditions. I prepared for a long night, loading extra salt and sand into my truck bed, and making sure all my equipment was in top condition. I started plowing Pine Ridge Estates at 4:30 a.m. Friday morning. The wind was howling, visibility was terrible, and the temperature had dropped to 8 degrees Fahrenheit. This was serious Colorado winter weather, the kind that could strand people in their homes if the streets were not cleared quickly. I followed my usual route. Main Boulevard first, then the arterial streets, then the residential loops and cul-de-sacs. I was methodical and thorough, just like always. The work took longer than usual because of the heavy snowfall and the wind that kept blowing snow back onto already cleared streets. Around 6:30 a.m., my phone rang. It was Gerald Finch. "Lucas, I am getting calls from residents on Aspen Grove Lane saying you have not plowed their street yet." Is everything okay? I pulled up my mental map of the subdivision. Aspen Grove Lane was Patricia Henderson's street. I have not gotten to that section yet, Gerald. I am working my way through systematically. Should hit that area in the next 45 minutes or so. Okay, good. Just checking. Patricia called me 3 times already, saying you are deliberately skipping her street in retaliation for the meeting. I felt my jaw clench. That is ridiculous. I plow the same pattern every time. I will get there when I get there. I know, Lucas. Just giving you a heads up that she is making noise about it. I hung up and continued working. But as I drove past the entrance to Aspen Grove Lane about 20 minutes later, heading toward another section I had not finished yet, I saw Patricia standing at the corner. She was bundled up in a heavy coat, holding her phone up to record me as I drove past. Fine. Let her record. I had a job to do and I was going to do it right. By 7:15, I had finished everything except Aspen Grove Lane and its small connecting court. I turned onto Patricia Street and started plowing. The snow was particularly deep here, probably because of the way the wind had drifted it between the houses. It took me almost 20 minutes to clear just her street. As I pushed the final pile of snow to the side, Patricia came storming out of her house. "You did this deliberately," she screamed, her voice barely audible over my truck's engine. "You plowed every other street first just to punish me." I rolled down my window. "Patricia, I follow the same pattern every time. Your street is always in the last section because of its location. Check my records from every other storm if you do not believe me." "Liar. You are a vindictive, petty man, and I am going to make sure everyone knows it." She took photos of my truck, the street, her watch showing the time, and anything else she could think of. I did not bother arguing further. I simply finished the job and left. The next storm hit on December 28th, right after Christmas. Tom Morrison was back from Florida by then, and I had hoped that would settle things down. Instead, it seemed to escalate Patricia's behavior. This time, when I started plowing at 4:45 a.m., Patricia was already waiting. She had positioned her car at the entrance to Aspen Grove Lane, blocking access completely. I sat in my truck, staring at her car for a moment, trying to decide how to handle this. Finally, I called Tom Morrison. "Lucas, what time is it?" Tom's voice was thick with sleep. "Sorry to wake you, Tom, but Patricia is blocking access to her street with her car. I cannot plow around her." There was a long sigh on the other end. "Give me 10 minutes. I will be there." True to his word, Tom arrived quickly, wearing sweatpants and a heavy jacket thrown over what appeared to be pajamas. He walked over to Patricia's car and knocked on her window. She rolled it down, and even from 50 feet away in my truck, I could hear the argument that followed. It lasted about 5 minutes before Patricia finally, reluctantly, moved her car. Tom walked over to my truck afterward. "Lucas, I am sorry. This is going to get resolved, but I need a little time to handle it properly. Can you just keep doing your job exactly as you have been?" "That is all I have ever done, Tom," he nodded wearily. "I know, and most of us appreciate it. Patricia has been a problem for a while now, not just with you. The board is discussing options." I plowed Aspen Grove Lane that morning in my usual rotation, second to last before the final cul-de-sac. Patricia recorded the entire thing from her porch, her phone's light visible in the pre-dawn darkness. The situation came to a head during the first storm of January. We got hit with a massive system that forecasters were calling a bomb cyclone, with nearly 2 feet of snow expected and temperatures plummeting below zero. The governor declared a state of emergency, and schools and businesses closed across the Denver metro area. I started plowing Pine Ridge Estates at 3:30 a.m., even earlier than usual, because I knew this would take all day. The snow was coming down so hard I could barely see past my plow blade, and the wind chill made the air feel like it was 40 below zero. Around 5 a.m., my phone started ringing. I ignored it because I was focused on not driving into a ditch. It rang 3 more times before I finally pulled over and checked. All 4 calls were from Patricia Henderson. I did not call her back. Instead, I kept working. At 6 a.m., she texted me. "Where are you? My street has not been plowed." I did not respond. At 6:30, another text. "This is an emergency. I need to get to work." Still no response. I was in the middle of clearing a particularly difficult section where a snowdrift had completely buried the road. At 7, my phone rang again. This time it was Tom Morrison. "Lucas, Patricia is having a meltdown. She is calling everyone on the board, saying you are deliberately neglecting her street and that she is going to sue both you and the HOA. Tom, I am working as fast as I can. This is a massive storm. I have not gotten to her section yet because I am following the same pattern I always do. She is just going to have to wait. I understand that. I told her the same thing, but she is." He paused, searching for words. "She is becoming unhinged about this. She actually called 911 claiming it was an emergency that her street was not plowed." "What did the police say?" "They told her to stop wasting emergency resources. Look, just keep doing what you are doing. But fair warning, she might try to interfere directly." That turned out to be an understatement. At 7:45, I was finally approaching Aspen Grove Lane. I could see Patricia's street ahead, buried under nearly 2 feet of pristine white snow. No one had driven on it yet, and it looked like a winter postcard, beautiful and completely impassable. As I turned onto the street, Patricia came running out of her house. She was dressed for work in a skirt suit and heels, completely inappropriate for the weather. She ran directly in front of my truck, waving her arms. I slammed on the brakes, feeling the truck slide slightly on the packed snow before coming to a stop about 15 feet from where she stood. She walked up to my window, shaking with either cold or rage, possibly both. "You did this on purpose. You deliberately saved my street for last to punish me. I have been waiting for hours. I have a very important meeting and now I am going to be late and it is all your fault." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "Patricia, I have plowed the exact same pattern I do every single time. Your street is in the last section. That has never changed. If you check my GPS logs from any storm this year, you will see the same thing. I do not care about your logs. I know what you are doing. This is harassment and I am going to make sure you never work in this neighborhood again. Patricia, I need you to move so I can actually plow your street. No, not until you admit what you are doing." We stared at each other through the open window, snow swirling between us. I could see neighbors starting to emerge from their houses, attracted by the commotion. "Patricia, you are standing in front of an active snow plow in sub-zero weather. This is dangerous. Please move." "I am not moving until you apologize." I put the truck in park and pulled out my phone. "Then I am calling the police because you are interfering with emergency snow removal operations, which is actually illegal under Colorado law." Her eyes widened slightly, but she held her ground. "You would not dare." I dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. "911, what is your emergency?" "Hi, this is Lucas Kerrigan with Henderson Snow Removal. I am attempting to clear streets in Pine Ridge Estates during the declared snow emergency, and a resident is physically blocking my vehicle and refusing to move." The operator took down the details and said an officer would be dispatched. I thanked her and hung up. Patricia's face had gone pale. "You actually called the police on me. You left me no choice. I have a job to do and you are preventing me from doing it. That is not just affecting you, it is affecting everyone else on this street who needs to get out." As if to emphasize my point, a man from 3 houses down came walking through the snow toward us. He was wearing jeans and a heavy coat, and he looked thoroughly fed up. "Patricia, what the hell are you doing?" he called out. "Some of us need to get to work. Let the man do his job." Another neighbor joined in. "Seriously, Patricia, move." She looked around at the gathering crowd, then back at me, then at her snow-covered car in the driveway. The reality of the situation seemed to finally penetrate. "This is not over," she hissed at me before stalking back toward her house. I waited until she was safely on her porch before continuing to plow. It took me another 15 minutes to clear Aspen Grove Lane completely. By the time I finished, a Lakewood police cruiser had arrived. The officer, a middle-aged woman named Officer Ramirez according to her name tag, asked me to explain the situation. I gave her a straightforward account and offered to show her my GPS logs proving that I had not deviated from my normal pattern. She interviewed Patricia next, then spoke with several neighbors. After about 20 minutes, she came back to my truck. "Mr. Kerrigan, you are free to continue your work. I spoke with Mrs. Henderson, and I believe we have reached an understanding about not interfering with emergency services." "Thank you, officer. For what it is worth, I think you showed considerable patience. A lot of people would have lost their temper." "Not my style. I just want to do my job." She nodded and headed back to her cruiser. Patricia stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching with an expression of pure hatred. I finished plowing the rest of Pine Ridge Estates by 10:30 that morning. It had taken 7 hours of continuous work in brutal conditions, but every street was cleared. As I was making my final pass down the main boulevard, Tom Morrison called again. "Lucas, I heard about what happened this morning. Are you okay?" "I am fine, Tom, just tired. I want you to know that the board held an emergency meeting this morning by conference call. We voted unanimously to send Patricia a formal warning about interfering with contracted services. We also documented everything in case we need to take further action." "I appreciate that, Tom. And Lucas, I want to make this very clear. The HOA fully supports you. What Patricia is doing is unacceptable, and we are taking steps to address it. You have a contract through the end of March, and we intend to honor it and renew it for next year if you are willing." "Thanks, Tom. That means a lot." But as I drove home that afternoon, exhausted and frozen, I wondered if the situation had finally peaked or if Patricia had more tricks up her sleeve. The answer came 2 weeks later. I had been plowing a smaller subdivision on the other side of Lakewood when my phone rang. It was Tom Morrison, and his voice was tight with anger. "Lucas, I need to tell you something before you hear it from someone else. Patricia has filed a lawsuit against you and the HOA." I pulled over to the side of the road. "What?" "She filed papers yesterday claiming harassment, breach of contract, and something called intentional infliction of emotional distress. She is asking for $50,000 in damages and demanding that your contract be terminated immediately." I sat there, trying to process this information. "Tom, this is insane. I have documentation for everything I have done. She does not have a case." "I know that, and our lawyer knows that, but she filed it anyway. We are going to fight this aggressively, and the HOA will cover all legal costs for you since you were acting under contract. But I wanted you to know. I appreciate the heads up. There is more. Patricia has also filed complaints with the Colorado Consumer Protection Agency, the Better Business Bureau, and apparently tried to report you to the EPA for some kind of environmental violation related to diesel emissions." "You are kidding." "I wish I was. She has gone full scorched earth. Our attorney thinks she is trying to overwhelm you with complaints and legal issues in hopes that you will just give up and go away. That is not going to happen. Good. Because we need you, and we are going to support you through this. Over the next few weeks, I received certified letters from various agencies regarding Patricia's complaints. Each one required a response, documentation, and in some cases, formal statements. It was time-consuming and infuriating, but I methodically addressed each issue. The Better Business Bureau complaint was easy to dismiss, since I had a perfect record and dozens of positive reviews. The Consumer Protection Agency found no merit in her claims after reviewing my contracts and service records. The EPA complaint was laughed out of existence since my truck met all current emissions standards, and I had documentation to prove it. The lawsuit was more serious, but my lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel Torres, was confident. "This is a textbook SLAPP suit," she explained during our first meeting. "That stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation." Essentially, she is trying to silence and intimidate you through legal action, even though she knows she does not have a real case. Colorado has strong anti-SLAPP statutes that let us move for dismissal and potentially recover attorney fees. How long will this take? Could be a few months. But Lucas, I have looked at all your documentation. You have GPS logs, written contracts, HOA bylaws, witness statements from dozens of residents, and even police reports. Her case is weaker than tissue paper. I would be shocked if a judge does not dismiss this on summary judgment. That was comforting, but the stress of being sued was real regardless. I found myself second-guessing everything I did, documenting every single movement and decision, and losing sleep over what crazy thing Patricia might do next. The next storm hit in early February. By this point, I was fed up with Patricia's behavior, but I was not going to let her affect how I did my job. I started plowing Pine Ridge estates at the usual time, followed my usual pattern, and eventually made it to Aspen Grove Lane. This time, Patricia did not come out to confront me. Instead, as I approached her house, I noticed something odd. There was a professional video camera on a tripod on her front lawn, clearly recording my truck as I plowed. Fine. Let her record. I had nothing to hide. What I did not expect was what happened next. After I finished plowing her street and moved on to the final cul-de-sac, I heard a loud crash behind me. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw Patricia standing in her driveway, next to her car, which now had a large dent in the rear bumper. She was holding her phone and appeared to be taking photos. My stomach sank. I put the truck in reverse and backed up to her driveway. "What happened?" I called out through my window. "You know exactly what happened," she shouted back. "Your plow threw a chunk of ice that hit my car. You are going to pay for this damage." I got out of my truck and walked over to examine her car. There was indeed a fresh dent in the rear bumper, but something about the situation felt wrong. The angle was weird, and there was no ice or snow debris anywhere near the impact point. "Patricia, I was nowhere near your car when that happened. I was 100 feet away plowing the cul-de-sac." "Liar. I have video evidence. That camera recorded everything." She pointed at the camera on the tripod. I looked at it more carefully and realized something. "Patricia, that camera is pointing at the street, not at your driveway. It would not have captured your car being hit." Her expression flickered for just a moment, a tiny crack in her angry facade. "Well, it captured you being in the area when it happened." I pulled out my phone and called Tom Morrison. "Tom, I need you to come to Patricia's house right now. She is claiming my plow damaged her car, and I need a witness before this gets out of hand." Tom arrived within 15 minutes, along with Gerald Finch. By then, A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, attracted by the commotion. Patricia repeated her claim, insisting that a chunk of ice from my plow had hit her car. I explained that I was too far away and the angle was wrong. Tom asked to see the video evidence. Patricia hesitated. I need to review it first. Patricia, if it shows what you claim, then we need to see it now, Tom said firmly. She went inside to retrieve the camera's memory card, taking longer than seemed necessary. When she came back out, she announced that the camera had malfunctioned and there was no usable footage. By now, even her most loyal supporter, Deborah Vance, was looking skeptical. Patricia, Tom said slowly, did you damage your own car to frame Lucas? That is absurd. How dare you accuse me of such a thing? One of the neighbors, an elderly man named Frank Peterson, spoke up. Actually, I saw Patricia in her driveway about 10 minutes ago. She was alone and I heard a loud bang. When I looked over, she was standing next to her car with something in her hand. It looked like she had just hit the car with something. Several other neighbors murmured in agreement. They had heard the bang too and had seen Patricia standing alone next to her car. Patricia's face went through several shades of red. You are all conspiring against me. This is a witch hunt. Tom pulled out his phone. I think we need to call the police. If Patricia filed a false insurance claim or attempted to frame Lucas for vandalism, that is a crime. You would not dare, Patricia. You have gone too far. Way too far. I am done trying to handle this diplomatically. Tom called the Lakewood Police Department. Officer Ramirez showed up again, along with another officer. After interviewing everyone present and examining the damage to Patricia's car, they asked her to come down to the station for further questioning. Are you arresting me? Patricia asked, her voice rising to a near shriek. Not at this time, madam, Officer Ramirez said calmly. But we need to take a formal statement regarding the allegations of filing a false report and possible attempted fraud. Patricia looked around at all the neighbors watching, at Tom and Gerald standing with their arms crossed, at me standing beside my truck with my phone out recording everything. This is because I am a woman standing up for herself, she shouted. You are all bullying me. Madam, please come with us, the second officer said. Patricia went inside to get her coat and purse, then left with the police officers. The crowd of neighbors slowly dispersed, talking among themselves in hushed, excited tones. Tom walked over to me. Lucas, I am sorry it came to this. I really am. Not your fault, Tom. The board is going to have an emergency meeting tomorrow night. I think it is time to remove Patricia from her position. This has become a liability for the entire community. The next evening, the HOA held a special meeting to address Patricia's conduct. Nearly every seat in the community center was filled, and several people had to stand along the walls. Patricia arrived wearing a gray dress and carrying a briefcase, looking like she was about to defend herself at trial. Tom Morrison opened the meeting by outlining the issues. Multiple complaints about Patricia's behavior, interference with contracted services, filing false police reports, attempted fraud, and damage to the HOA's reputation and relationships with service providers. Patricia tried to defend herself, claiming she was being persecuted for standing up for community standards. But the board had documentation of everything, including statements from dozens of residents who were fed up with her behavior. The vote to remove her from the board was nearly unanimous, with only Deborah Vance abstaining. Patricia stormed out of the meeting, shouting threats about lawsuits and conspiracies. 2 weeks later, the criminal charges were finalized. The Lakewood District Attorney's Office charged Patricia Henderson with filing a false police report and attempted insurance fraud. Both were misdemeanors, but they carried potential jail time and fines. My lawyer, Rachel Torres, also filed our anti-SLAPP motion regarding Patricia's lawsuit against me. The judge heard arguments in late February and dismissed Patricia's case with prejudice, meaning she could not refile it. The judge also ordered her to pay my attorney fees, which totaled nearly $18,000. Patricia's fraud trial took place in early April, after the snow had melted and spring had started to green up the Colorado landscape. I attended as a witness, though I was not called to testify. The prosecution's case was strong. They had witness statements, Patricia's own contradictory explanations, and expert testimony that the damage to her car was inconsistent with being hit by flying ice or snow. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found her guilty on both counts. The judge sentenced Patricia to 30 days in jail, suspended pending 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay restitution for the costs of the police investigation. She was also required to attend anger management counseling. I saw her briefly in the courthouse hallway afterward. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her husband, a quiet man named Richard who I had only met a few times, was with her. He looked exhausted and embarrassed. Patricia glanced at me, then quickly looked away. No words were exchanged. Tom Morrison called me that evening. "Did you hear about the sentencing?" I was there. "Good. I want you to know that the HOA board voted unanimously to renew your contract for next year. We also voted to give you a bonus for putting up with all this nonsense. 10% of your annual contract value." "Tom, you do not have to do that." "Yes, we do. You handled an impossible situation with professionalism and grace. Most people would have told us to shove it and walked away. You kept doing your job, documented everything properly, and never stooped to her level. That is worth rewarding. I appreciate it, really. Also, we have a new vice president. Robert Chen agreed to step up. He is already talking about reviewing all our policies to make sure we never end up in this situation again." Spring turned into summer, and Pine Ridge Estates slowly recovered from the drama. Patricia and Richard put their house up for sale in May and moved out in June. I heard through the grapevine that they relocated to Aurora, on the other side of Denver. Deborah Vance quietly resigned from the Neighborhood Watch Committee. Several residents who had remained neutral during the conflict apologized to me, saying they should have spoken up sooner. The neighborhood settled into a peaceful routine. Kids played in the streets, people walked their dogs, and the HOA focused on normal things like organizing a 4th of July celebration and discussing which color schemes were acceptable for exterior house paint. When December rolled around again, and the first snow started falling, I felt a sense of anticipation rather than dread. I had my contracts renewed not just with Pine Ridge Estates, but with 3 other subdivisions who had heard about how professionally I handled the situation. The first real storm of the season hit in mid-December. I started plowing Pine Ridge Estates at 5 a.m., following my established route. The streets were quiet, the snow was falling steadily, and everything felt right. As I turned onto Aspen Grove Lane, now occupied by a new family who had moved into Patricia's old house, I saw a man standing on the porch in his bathrobe. My heart sank for a moment, remembering all the confrontations, but then the man waved and gave me a thumbs up. He went back inside and emerged a minute later with a travel mug of coffee, which he brought out to my truck. "Thanks for clearing the streets so early," he said, handing me the mug through my window. "I have surgery scheduled at the hospital at 8 and I was worried about making it there on time. You are a lifesaver." "Just doing my job," I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "And good luck with your surgery." "Thanks." "Hey, I heard some wild stories about what went down here last winter. Sounds like you handled it like a real professional." I tried. "Well, if you ever need a reference, let me know. I am a doctor at Lutheran Medical Center and I know a lot of people. Good service should be recognized." We chatted for another minute before I moved on to finish the route. The coffee was excellent, and the interaction left me smiling for the rest of the morning. As I wrapped up the last street and headed home around 7:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Tom Morrison. "Streets look great. Thanks for everything, Lucas." I typed back a quick reply. "Anytime, Tom. That is what you pay me for." But it was more than just a job, and we both knew it. I had stood my ground when someone tried to bully me out of doing good work. I had documented everything, stayed professional, and let the system work the way it was supposed to. And in the end, justice had prevailed, not through some dramatic confrontation or clever revenge, but through patience, proper procedures, and community support. Pine Ridge estates would get many more snowstorms over the coming years. I would plow them all, starting early in the morning when most people were still sleeping, pushing heavy white powder to the sides of streets so that families could get to work and school safely. And if anyone ever complained about the noise, well, I had 18,000 pages of documentation proving I was doing everything exactly right. The best part was the peace of mind. I could focus on my work without looking over my shoulder, worrying about what crazy accusation might come next. The new families moving into the neighborhood were uniformly appreciative of reliable snow removal service. Several even nominated me for a local small business award, which I did not win but appreciated nonetheless. Winter settled into its rhythm. Storm after storm rolled through Colorado's Front Range, dumping snow that ranged from a few inches to a couple of feet. Each time, I fired up my truck in the dark hours before dawn and went to work, my plow blade scraping against asphalt, my headlights cutting through swirling flakes. Robert Chen turned out to be an excellent HOA vice president, and then president after Tom Morrison stepped down the following year. Robert approached the position with common sense and fairness, focusing on maintaining property values and community safety rather than on petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. The lawsuit settlement money from Patricia helped cover my legal expenses, though the whole ordeal still left a bad taste. But I learned valuable lessons about documentation, standing firm on principle, and the importance of having a solid contract with clear terms. My business grew steadily. Word spread about how I had handled the situation with professionalism and integrity. Other HOAs reached out, wanting to hire someone they could trust to do good work without drama. By the end of that second winter after Patricia left, I had doubled my contract base and hired 2 additional drivers to help handle the expanded workload. I ran into Patricia's husband Richard once, completely by accident at a hardware store in Golden. We both recognized each other at the same moment. There was an awkward pause, then he walked over. "Lucas, I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I should have stopped Patricia when things started getting out of hand. I knew she was becoming obsessed, but I did not want to deal with the conflict at home. I am sorry you got dragged into our dysfunction." "I appreciate that, Richard. How is Patricia doing?" He sighed heavily. "Better, actually. The anger management counseling helped more than either of us expected. She has a therapist now who is working with her on control issues and anxiety. Turns out a lot of her behavior was driven by untreated mental health problems. That does not excuse what she did, but it explains it. I am glad she is getting help. We both are. The move to Aurora was good for us too. Fresh start, no history. She resigned from being involved in our new HOA, just trying to live quietly and work on ourselves." We talked for a few more minutes before parting ways. I left the encounter feeling something I had not expected: compassion. Patricia had made my life miserable for months, had cost me time and money and sleep, but in the end, she was just a troubled person who let her issues spiral out of control. That did not mean I forgave her completely or forgot what happened. But I could let go of the anger and move forward. The third winter after the incident, Pine Ridge Estates got hit with one of the biggest storms in decades. Nearly 3 feet fell over a 36-hour period, breaking records and shutting down most of the Denver metro area. The governor declared a state of emergency, and even major highways closed. I spent 48 hours essentially living in my truck, catching brief naps between plowing runs, surviving on coffee and gas station sandwiches. My crew and I worked around the clock to keep our contracted neighborhoods passable. When it was finally over, and the sun came out to reveal a landscape transformed into a blindingly white wonderland, I was so exhausted I could barely see straight. But every street in Pine Ridge Estates was cleared. People could get out of their driveways, emergency vehicles could respond if needed, and life could begin returning to normal. Tom Morrison, who had stayed on the HOA board as treasurer, sent me a photo he took from his doorway. It showed my truck at the end of the street, plow blade catching the golden light of sunrise, with perfectly cleared pavement stretching out behind me. He captioned it, "What professionalism looks like." That photo ended up being used in my advertising materials. It perfectly captured what I try to do every day: show up, do excellent work, and serve my community reliably no matter what challenges arose. The fourth winter brought fewer dramatic storms but steady, consistent snowfall. My business had grown enough that I bought 2 new trucks and hired 3 more drivers. We expanded beyond just residential subdivisions into commercial parking lots and business districts. Henderson's Snow Removal Services became one of the most respected snow removal companies on the west side of Denver. We had a reputation for reliability, professionalism, and quality work. We charged fair prices, showed up when promised, and treated customers with respect. Every time I drove past the house where Patricia used to live, I thought about that chaotic winter. The new owners had repainted the exterior and redone the landscaping. It looked fresh and welcoming, like the drama that had unfolded there had been washed away by time and new beginnings. The HOA functioned smoothly now, handling routine business without unnecessary conflict. Board meetings were boring in the best possible way, focused on budget reviews and maintenance schedules rather than personal vendettas. I still started plowing at dawn when storms hit. My truck still made noise scraping through snow and ice. But now, instead of complaints, I got thank you notes and occasional travel mugs of coffee handed through my window by grateful residents. 5 years after the incident, I was plowing Pine Ridge Estates during an early morning storm when I noticed someone standing outside taking photos. My first instinct was defensive, remembering Patricia and her video camera. But as I got closer, I realized it was a teenage kid with a nice camera on a tripod. I stopped and rolled down my window. "Everything okay?" The kid, who could not have been more than 16, looked excited rather than angry. "Oh yes, sir. I am doing a project for my photography class about people who work night shifts and early mornings. Would you mind if I took some pictures of you plowing?" "Sure, go ahead. Just stay safe and out of the way." He took photos for about 10 minutes, getting shots from different angles as I worked. When I finished the street, he came over to show me some of the images on his camera's screen. They were actually really good, capturing the pre-dawn atmosphere and the purposeful motion of the work. "These are great," I said. "What is your name?" "Kevin. Kevin Marks." My family just moved here last year, and everyone talks about how good your snow removal service is. I thought it would be cool to document it. Well, thanks. If you want to send me copies of the finals for the project, I would appreciate it. I might want to use them for advertising if that is okay. Really? That would be awesome. He gave me his email address and we both went on with our days. A week later, he sent me the finished photos. They were spectacular, showing the dedication and hard work that went into keeping communities safe during winter storms. I framed one and hung it in my small office. It showed my truck mid-plow, snow spraying to the side, with the first light of dawn breaking over the Rockies in the background. Below the photo, I added a small plaque with a quote that summed up my philosophy. Excellence is doing common things uncommonly well. Looking back on everything that happened with Patricia Henderson, I realized she had inadvertently done me a favor. She had tested my systems, my documentation, my professionalism, and my character. She had pushed me to be better at every aspect of my business, and by trying to tear me down, she had created opportunities for me to demonstrate the quality of my work to a much wider audience. Her actions had consequences for her that I took no joy in. Criminal charges, fines, community service, and the embarrassment of being removed from the HOA board were harsh penalties, but they were the natural results of her own choices. Meanwhile, my business thrived because I had made different choices. To stay professional, to document everything, to trust in proper procedures, and to keep doing excellent work even when it would have been easier to walk away. The storms kept coming, as they always do in Colorado winters. And I kept plowing, starting before dawn, pushing heavy snow aside, making paths for people to live their lives. Some mornings, when the snow was falling heavy and the world was still dark and quiet except for my truck's engine, I thought about that first confrontation with Patricia in her pink bathrobe, angry about the noise. I thought about all the drama that followed, the lawsuits and police reports and tense meetings. And then I thought about the traveling mugs of coffee, the thank you notes, the kids like Kevin who saw value in documenting honest work, and the steady growth of a business built on reliability and integrity. The noise of my plow at dawn was not harassment. It was the sound of someone caring enough to show up when conditions were terrible, to do hard work so others could do theirs, to serve a community faithfully regardless of whether anyone was watching. That sound echoed through the quiet streets of Pine Ridge Estates and a dozen other neighborhoods every winter. It was the sound of professionalism, of dedication, of a job done right, and no amount of complaints from people like Patricia Henderson would ever silence it.